Okay, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. To have a really cool review for you guys from the brand Glycine. A little about them: they were founded back in 1914 and now are owned by Invicta Group. These are still Swiss-made timepieces, and they fall within that kind of upper entry-level to mid-tier military-themed watch design space. Now, in terms of type of watch, this is a dive watch. Some key common characteristics, and it sounds like what you're looking for a diver. Of course, you want to find water resistance. Typically, there's some type of screw-down crown, something that's tough, legible with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelet. This is their new for 2025 Combat Sub 39 in the white colorway, the GL0538, and it's essentially a downsized take on their popular 42mm Combat Sub line with 300 meters of water resistance and a refined aesthetic again for the year 2025, including a fully brushed bracelet, which was definitely a welcome addition. Now, these go for $515 direct, and they are only available from Glycine's official store at glycinestore.com in terms of their web shop. This sample was kindly sent in by glycinestore.com for this video feature. So I'm really excited to share it with you guys. This one really won me over. I, of course, previously reviewed their more basic blue dial variation of the 39mm, and it really, I mean, it's a watch that I still wear today. So to see these little tweaks and updates to really make this feel absolutely refreshed and I think revitalized was really, great news for me. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, a little bit of Glycine swag that came in the box. I thought that was pretty cool, of course, with their military background. But you know what? When it comes to this watch in particular, guys, big fan of this silhouette. I think it is a very good looking piece. And, you know, it's so much so that I previously purchased this blue dial variation a few years ago, and it's still in heavy rotation, or I guess at least as heavy as it can be when you're a watch reviewer and you're constantly having new watches to try on and enjoy, which are absolutely first world problems. But I really like this one. But as you can see, I don't have it on its bracelet because one of the things it had was polished center links, which I was just, I mean, in the right context, I'm okay with it. In this case, I felt like the polished center links just didn't really complement the watch to its, full potential. And now I see this and yeah, I dig it. I think the white colorway absolutely just kind of gives it almost like a space, modern, more contemporary vibe, which I really, really like. Not that the blue and, some of their more classic variations, even some with some faux patina and whatnot, weren't attractive, but to me, this kind of is almost like a whole new watch. Like, it just opens a different door and takes it to another level, which I can appreciate. Now, in terms of the dimensions, 39 millimeters in diameter, about 39.5 at the bezel, 11.5 millimeters thick, which is nice and thin in that profile. And that's with 300 meters of water resistance and a Swiss-made sleeve movement, right? So that's very, very strong in terms of the specs just on paper. Also, one thing to note, 46.6 millimeters lug to lug, and you can see that this has a nice drape in terms of that mid case in the way that it is beautifully turned down, quite organic within its curvature there. So you do have mostly brushed with a few polished accents, and I think that really suits the aesthetic of this, especially with a name like Combat Sub. So, obviously my time in the Marine Corps, I can appreciate things that are meant to be quite tactical. But hey, in the civilian sector, I think some of these things have become tactical. So I can appreciate that. Now, it does have a flat sapphire, which I think is the right choice here. Feels very modern, obviously very thin, and it gives it just this nice flat aesthetic, especially with that flat matte finish of the dial. So getting into the bezel action here, 120 clicks. Great engagement in terms of that high polished coin edge bezel grip there. Nice balance between clicky and smooth, and lines up quite nicely as well. So very, very cool. So that's going to be one of the few places where you're going to find polish on here is going to be, I mean, it doesn't look super polished now because I just got my fingerprints all over it, but that's going to be that little ring there on the outer section, which adds a nice touch of refinement, as well as an inner ring that is also highly polished, as you can see around to kind of sandwich that bezel insert, which is beautifully satinized. Now, getting into the crown, nicely signed and a great size, guys. It doesn't stick out too much, but it does have some width to it, so it's easy to grip. Also, beautifully signed in this case, guys. And then we move on to the case back, which is going to have a nice kind of embossed design with some light etching. And although you can't see the movement inside, it's known as their GL224. And the reason why it's called that is because at one point they could kind of be shifting in between the 2824 or the SW200, depending on, which is why most brands honestly will rename movements. It's just so that they're not so tethered to one particular supplier, but currently these are SW200s provided from Sellita in terms of this current run. So the specs are going to be a 38-hour power reserve with a 4 Hertz sweep, so that's 28,800 vibrations per hour in terms of that beat rate. So you can see that seconds hand is going to have a nice smooth sweep in a very traditional Swiss sense. Now, the dial itself does have these very nice applied indices with a printed 24-hour scale, which I think fills the space quite nicely, feels quite balanced, and again adds to that more technical and tactical vibe. You do have a matte white dial in this case. You have the date at 6 o'clock with the reverse colorway, which I think is very cool. So it's gonna be a black disc with white font, which plays off of that outer ring. That does also help give you a little bit more compact feeling on that dial presence, which I feel help, for those of you who might have a smaller wrist, or for those of you that are looking for something that feels a little bit more vintage inspired. I feel like that really does help keep this watch quite tidy. Now, of course, it does have black hands there, and that plays off of the black surrounds on those indices and the black text. So very nice. Everything is also pretty well lumed. It is using Swiss Superluminova that glows green, although I couldn't get the specifications on the website in terms of what the specific combination was, in terms of the formula, but it does really well. It looks quite white and clean and clear in daylight. And then, of course, it's going to glow quite green in the darkness. 30 atmospheres of water resistance, which is fantastic, or 300 meters. 20 millimeter lugs here, nicely drilled. And again, I love this with the fully polished setup. Nice, simple 3-link. It has a female end link, so the drape on here is going to be perfect. You're not going to be extending this case out at all with this setup. Nice, solid 3-link setup with split pin construction, so that is going to be a bit of a drawback, but again, at the price point at $515, you can't be too upset with it. And then, at the end of the day, push pins are actually pretty easy to set up, and I would rather have push pins on a solid bracelet versus screw pins and then have something where there's going to be a lot of stamped pieces or hollow end links. Yeah, sure, you could have it all, but again, if that's going to be a shortcoming, it's one that I'm completely okay with. I'm actually quite fond of pin and collar systems, which is people's probably least favorite setup. Now, in terms of the clasp, very standard here. It's going to be more of a stamped affair on the outer section, so I'd consider this semi-milled because the outer flip lock as well as the push button mechanism and the clamshell on the outer face are going to be pressed, where you're going to have fully milled in terms of that folding scissor section. You're also getting 3 positions of manual micro adjust, which again, I'm always happy to see something that flows, that works. So as much as people want to harp on toolless micro adjust clasp and how, there's also a lot of clasps out there that are big, bulky, chunky, that check boxes on paper, but don't wear well in the metal. And I'll say this is one that wears well in the metal, and it does the job, right? You're getting half links in here anyway, and then also you're able to set up for micro adjustments. So you're going to have a lot of options to get this lined up beautifully and perfectly to sit on your wrist. But with that said, let's actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, now as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this wears quite beautifully. Of course, 7.5 inches is on the larger side of average, but you can also notice it's a pretty tall and round wrist. So it's not like I have this super wide, flat, and accommodating setup. So I'm also going to be, quite concerned when it comes to lug to lug in terms of the dial to bezel ratios and ultimate dimensions in general. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, it's just going to make the watch seem a bit larger than it actually is. So I like to keep my wrist nice and low and then just tighten up the frame so that you guys can get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio, trying to combat a bit of that lens distortion. And you guys can see here, look at that. Does it get any better? Look at, whew. I mean, some people might think, oh, is that a little, let me just, all right, get the dust off there. Check that out. Oof. I'm digging all the satinization. It just ties in again to that tool watch nature. Beautifully contoured there to wrap around the wrist. Everything drapes perfectly. And again, guys, I don't have some super wide. I do have a larger wrist, slightly larger than average, but it's not, again, super flat and wide. So the fact that it drapes really nicely is something that I really appreciate. So check that out. Look at the thinness, guys. 300 meters of water resistance, and you're getting this level of thinness. And the movement in there isn't some super svelte, super ultra thin movement that makes that easy. This is done with care. This is done with a nice amount of engineering, especially when you consider that they did up the water resistance to 300 meters versus their 42 millimeter watches, which typically have been 200 meters over the years. And those are also quite thin. But then you see this at 39 millimeters and it just feels very, very balanced and like a complete package, which I can appreciate. Let's just breathe that in. And again, while the clasp isn't the most exciting, it does the job. It flows with the bracelet. It keeps everything nicely balanced on the wrist. So again, I can't be too upset with it. Sure, there could be a cooler clasp. There could always be a cooler clasp, but I'm not a clasp collector. I'm more of a watch collector. So when I think about the watch case, the head here, the dial, the way the hands flow, the way everything is so beautifully spaced on the dial in terms of legibility, and then also from just a dive watch enthusiast space where you really want to have that beautiful balance and of course that symmetry to the dial. I just can't get enough of this piece. So with that said, let's get it off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Hey, check that out. I mean, it's not the craziest Lume, but hey, it's a dive watch and it is glowing like you would expect from a dive watch. And, with the thinness there, sometimes you can expect there to be things just slightly dimmer. And I'd say that might be the case here. It's not knock your socks off type of Lume, but again, it does the job. And you're getting also, extreme legibility in daylight. So yes, when you are going to get into darker situations, it's going to be not quite as high contrast, but I think that's completely fine in this case. Now, getting into some low light transition, that's something I like to work in because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So as I say with these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting, guys. And you guys can see here just the beautiful brushing, that satinization, how uniform the light is gliding over those bracelet links, over the, look at the play on that bezel insert. And then, of course, the consistency when it comes to that matte white dial. There's not a lot of play there. And I think that's one of the, features of this piece is that white dial just renders so crispy, clean, and clear at just pretty much all all times, whether you're utilizing Lume or you're just looking at it straight on with a fair amount of light. And then you're going to be using the contrast of the black surrounds, the black font, of course, that black outer track, and even a nice contrast there, making it feel, again, it just feels quite complete in terms of its theme when you look at that, even the date window there with the reverse colorway. So very, very cool, guys. This is one that I was very excited to see and definitely very excited to get my hands on in person. Another huge shout out to glycinestore.com for connecting with me on this one. I reached out to them and thankfully they answered. There's tons of brands, guys, believe it or not, that I reach out to that I never hear back from. And, you know, yeah, there's a lot of brands that reach out to me as well. And we kind of try to work things out and see what we can make happen. So for me, guys, I've been a fan of Glycine. You guys know, if you've watched my channel, I have my Airman 18, which I still love and wear to this day, as well as my Blue GL Combat Sub. So this is a brand that, yeah, I personally do have a bit of a soft spot for, just because what they offer is just so competitive and compelling. So closing thoughts, guys, on the wrist, handsome setup, guys. It oozes a certain versatile quality not seen in previous iterations. Right? Even the blue dial that I had that I still love, it just didn't give me the same vibe that this one gets. Like, this one just takes it up to another level. In terms of model variants, guys, they have 36 millimeter variations, 39 millimeter, 42 and 43 millimeter variants available. Check the site links down in the description for details if you are interested in kind of shopping around and perusing some of the current inventory. Now, in terms of comparable models, at right around $500, you're actually right in the thick of some of the most popular affordable divers on the market, from Seiko and Citizen to Squale and Certina. And that's if you're looking to, you know, kind of cross shop against heritage brands. And, you know, in your typical micro brands, right, you add those in and the playing field opens up even further. So it's just a super competitive space, guys. And you know, you have models you can get from Tissot, let's say, that honestly do not compare to this, and they just don't hold a candle. So this is a really compelling piece for me, and it has been over the years, and it's nice to see them refresh it, revamp it, and breathe some new life into a platform that I think a lot of people still enjoy pretty thoroughly. So for me, guys, bottom line, I've always loved my original Blue GL0400 Combat Sub 39, and you know, but those polished center links did prevent me from enjoying it on a steel bracelet. So this latest update really has elevated this 39mm platform for me and revived Glycine's place among value-rich brands enthusiasts need to have on their radar. Yes, I will say it. You need to have this brand on your radar if you're looking for those Swiss value pieces. I think this just offers so much. But let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you liked the video, please do it like. And if you're already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.